Okay, good evening, everybody. It is so nice to be back here, Mussar Mondays. We are in the 68th installment of this incredible book of Mesilat Yesharim, page number 339. And we started page 339. And I don't know, where did we leave off last time?
I think you started into the first part.
Oh yeah, so we did the first chapter of Piety, and now we're going to do the second chapter. The first part we discussed was just the idea of what piety is. What is piety? Now we're going to talk about the different elements of piety, and this is a very long chapter and a very exciting one. It's great that we're starting it right after Simchat Torah, after we're dancing with the Torah, after we started a brand new year, and we attained a new level of atonement after Yom Kippur. It really is a special time for us to begin a whole new chapter of our learning of piety, of what it means to be a true, holy person, someone who's remember the definition we mentioned previously was someone who in the different definitions that people have for what Chassidut is, what Chassidut is, we said that we're going to redefine it to one who does what is obligated, but then does a little bit more. Right? I'm not going to just suffice with doing only what's obligated upon me, but do a little bit more and do it better than I'm obligated to. Before we begin, I'm just going to make a blessing on the water here. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nihiyeh b'dvaro.
Amen.
Okay, I apologize. Okay, so chapter number 19, the elements of Chassidut and piety. Chelkei HaChassidut HaRishonim Shlosha. The three primary elements of Chassidut, that is the genuine piety and bringing satisfaction to Hashem, right? Because we already established that there's nothing that we can do for Hashem, right? Hashem needs nothing from us. So what can we do for Hashem? We want to beautify and perfect the way in which we serve Hashem. That's what we're trying. That's what we're aiming for. The first concerns Chassidut in deeds. Hasheni be'ofen ha'asiyah. The second concerns the manner of carrying out all deeds, the decorum and emotion that should accompany actions. Hashlishi b'kavana. The third concerns the intent that one should have while performing deeds. Okay, so the intent is very different. Okay, so let's see. The first element of Chassidut, it itself gets divided up to three different categories. To two subdivisions. One of them concerning deeds of man between man and Hashem, and the other, the second concerns the interactions between man and his fellow. He says, now, in the first part of the first, which is deeds between man and Hashem, he says, the first subdivision of the first main element of Chassidut concerns deeds that are between man and Hashem, as just mentioned. Okay? And its essence is the fulfillment of all of the mitzvahs with all of the intricacies. Okay? Every mitzvah has thousands of different intricate details. If you take any mitzvah that's given to us in the Torah, right? So you could do a mitzvah of, observing mitzvah of tzitzit, wearing tzitzit appropriately, right? So wearing the mitzvah of tzitzit is great. So there's an entry level of wearing tzitzit, And then there is a deeper level of wearing ones which are more what we call mehudar, those that are more stringent, those that are more careful, those that are more cautious in fulfilling this mitzvah with greater attention to the details of the mitzvah, even those that are not essential to the mitzvah's fulfillment. Right? We know, for example, the mitzvah of menorah. Right? We light a menorah on Hanukkah. That's the next big holiday we're going to be at in 2 months. And in 2 months, we will be at the holiday of Hanukkah. And everyone's going to light a menorah. Now, we can all just buy a $5 menorah in Target, right, and get some candles. Or we want to beautify the mitzvah. We want the mitzvah to be beautiful, and many people buy a silver menorah. Some people have big, lavish menorahs, right? What's the idea? The idea is, if it's a mitzvah, and I love that mitzvah, because what does the mitzvah do? It represents my relationship between me and God. I want it to be the greatest possible. It's like, imagine a guy is married or engaged to this young woman, right, who he loves tremendously. Do you think he'll buy just flowers because they're flowers, or does he want to pick the most beautiful flowers? Because it represents his love, right? The same is true with our relationship with God. When we perform a mitzvah, we don't say, I just want, hey, light the menorah. Or do we want it to be the most beautiful type of expression of love? And that's what we're aiming for when we are observing the mitzvahs between us and God. So the essence of the fulfilling the mitzvahs with all their intricacies, even those that are not essential to the mitzvah fulfillment. You fulfill the mitzvah with any simple menorah. Right? You fulfill the mitzvah with any Seder plate, right? But do you want it to just be, I'll give you another example. To the point where almost many people have made the mistake of focusing just on the external, not on the internal. So specifically, I'm referring to the mitzvah of mezuzah. Mezuzah is a very powerful mitzvah. The Torah tells us to put a mezuzah on all our doors, all our doorways. Right? So there are a few exceptions, like a bathroom or a room that's too small, like a little closet, right? A little hallway that's very, very small, right? So those you don't need to. But other rooms in our homes we should have, in our study, in our kitchen, in our living room, dining room, any room that has a doorway, any doorway in our home should have a mitzvah. So what many people have done, what is the mitzvah of mezuzah? The mitzvah of mezuzah is to have the parchment of Shema on our doorposts, right? Not a photocopied paper. What many people have done is that they go to Israel and they go to a gift shop and they buy a beautiful case for the mezuzah, which there's no mitzvah to put a beautiful case on your doorway. There is a mitzvah to have the parchment that's written by hand with the portion of the Shema on it and put that on your doorway, right? But many people get carried away by beautifying the mitzvah without the actual mitzvah being in it. All right? So that's not what Hashem wants. Hashem wants do the mitzvah and then do whatever it takes to make that mitzvah. Again, if someone is striving for piety, which we're all striving for, we want to perfect the relationship between us and the Almighty. So what is it that we do? We add whatever we can to the mitzvah that we're already performing. Ad mekom sheyad ha'adam agas, to the very best of a person's ability. We do the best we can do, right? So if a person isn't able to spend money on buying a beautiful menorah or buying a beautiful etrog, right? It's like we just finished the holiday of Sukkot, right? So we want to have a beautiful sukkah. We want to have a beautiful etrog and a lulav, right? We don't want it to just say, oh, it's kosher, goodbye. Well, what's the cheapest I can get away with this? Right? That's not the way we would go with our vacations, right? When we go on vacation, we don't just say, look, I'm going on vacation, and I don't care that all I have is a little mat to sleep on. What do you mean? I want to be in a nice room. I want to get the upgrade to the presidential suite, right? I don't want to just be in some, right? You understand? But when it comes to a mitzvah, suddenly people are very, very concerned about spending money on the mitzvah. Well, if we're able to be elevated enough to make the relationship between us and Hashem special, then we want to beautify it as much as possible. And we want to make it as great as we can. So you know what? If a person cannot spend as much as he can to make the mitzvah of etrog so beautiful and so perfect, do the best that you can. Not that, okay, where's my box? Give me my box. I'm out. I got it. Goodbye. Right? What does it look like? Well, it doesn't need to be so beautiful. On the contrary, you know what it says? It says that the mitzvah of lulav and etrog needs to be hadar. It needs to be beautiful. Beautiful. To who? To who does it look beautiful? To you. Because that mitzvah represents your love to the Almighty. And the beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. To one person, an etrog, which is more yellow, one more green, one has a shape like this, one has a shape like that, one has a shape like this. Everyone has some with a pitum, without a pitum, without the... Everyone has their own style of what it means to be beautiful. But what if a person can't afford the one that he really believes is the most beautiful, most perfect esrog? Right? You're not obligated to fulfill the mitzvah that is beyond your reach, right? To the point where it's beyond your reach. But we should fulfill the mitzvah on its simplest level and then try to do it whatever upgrades we can with those mitzvahs. Okay? By the way, it goes the same with having a prayer book that's nice. It same goes with tefillin, right? A person who has tefillin, just give me the cheapest that you've got, Rabbi. Okay, I've had people tell me that. I just want to fulfill the mitzvah and leave me alone. But eventually, when people start caring about the mitzvah more, and people will start loving the mitzvah more, they say, you know what? It's time for an upgrade. Now it's time for me to make this mitzvah that means so much to me now, to make it even more special. And that's the goal. That's the same with Shabbos, right? Shabbos candles, the candelabra, to make it beautiful. And every part of the mitzvah that we do. But it's not only in the external. It's also in the internal. To make the observance of the mitzvah special, where we have focus, we have intention, and we have kavanah in the mitzvah that we're doing, where it's not just a habit, where it's not just rote. I remember there was a rabbi of mine in yeshiva that would put his hand on the mezuzah. And many people have a custom to kiss the mezuzah, right? They kiss the mezuzah. But many people kiss the mezuzah so much they don't even know what they're doing, right? They're just walking through it. It's a habit. That's what they do. He would put his hand on the mezuzah, close his eyes, and then he would walk by, right? He would focus. Let me feel this connection. Let me take this as an opportunity to connect to the Almighty. So, ve'ele heim hakruim shekraum. This is what Chachamenu Zuchron Lavracha Yesharim Mitzvah. These non-essential details are what our sages of blessed memory call the auxiliary elements of the mitzvah. And they said about them, about this, the auxiliary elements of a mitzvah ward off punishment. Ki af al pi sheguf ha-mitzvah nishlam zulasam. For although the essential part of the mitzvah is completed without them, the kvar yatsa b'zei yidei, and one has already discharged his obligation with the performance of the mitzvah's essential part. Hine zel l'chol hamon Yisrael. This is sufficient for all of the masses of Israel. Acha chasidim ein lohem elo laharbos b'ashlomasam. But those who seek Chassidut, those who seek this level of piety, they seek to go beyond the call of duty, and there must be nothing but lavish in completing all the details of the mitzvos, even those that are not absolutely required. V'lo lemayet bohem klal, and not to skimp on them at all. Okay? So there's a whole element here of what we're saying, not to just suffice with, I did what I needed to do and leave me alone now with the rest of the mitzvah. No. We don't want to be people who just skimp out and do the least we have to do. I'll give you an example. Last week we had a very, I would say, a low-profile Hachnasat Sefer Torah. Hachnasat Sefer Torah is the dedication of a new Torah scroll, where Torch got a Torah scroll dedicated by our dear friend Mr. Eitan and Mrs. Valerie Merwis. They dedicated a Torah to Torch. And because of COVID, we didn't make a big thing about it. We wanted to get it active already in one of the local synagogues. So our Torah is being used by one of the local synagogues. And we did a very modest procession in the streets here, but it was again mostly social distanced and mostly adhering to the general guidelines. We had masks there for whoever wanted, and no one was obligated to do anything that they didn't feel comfortable doing in the current climate. Now, what does it take to write a Torah? Well, it depends. It depends how pious you are, right? You can write a Torah scroll for $10,000, but do you want to write the nicest and the finest, or do you want to get away with the cheapest? Okay? And we have this with every single mitzvah. Do you want to do it the finest way, or do you want to just get away with the least possible? And that's the idea of what we're trying to talk about here. People who are pious want to not just get away with the least possible. They want to I want to do it to the fullest. I want to do it to the greatest perfection I can, right? Whatever that mitzvah may be. Again, that could be the mitzvah of kosher, right? I'm not going to just suffice with there are many different standards of kosher. Many different standards of kosher. Now, to someone who's new to kosher, you know what? As long as it has a symbol, is already a step. Okay? I remember I was once sitting in a guy's house. We were learning, and it was during the month that we do as a kosher month. And kosher month is a time where we partner with many different supermarkets and many different restaurants and caterers, and we give out free food and food tastings and all of these different things. So I remember I was talking it over with this individual. I was learning with him. He's a doctor, and he tells me, Rabbi, I think it's a great program, but I'll never be kosher. I'll never be kosher. I said, really? I said, I guarantee that if you take me right now to your pantry, I will show you that more than 50% of your pantry is already kosher. He says, not possible. We don't buy any kosher here. And for me to retrain my family to buy kosher would be impossible. So I said, fine. I said, come show me your pantry. He shows me his pantry. And I made a shelf. I look at one item. I said, oh, there's a kosher symbol. Take out the next item. I'm like, oh, you see that? There's a kosher symbol there. And we go through. He says, no way. He says, you telling me that U with the circle around it, that means kosher? You're at the K with the circle around it, that means kosher? He says, that's crazy. That's what he says. That's not, I never knew that, right? And it turned out there were about maybe 10% of the products in his kitchen that were not kosher just because he bought the wrong brand. But he could buy the same one in kosher. And then there was maybe 2% that were actually treif that you wouldn't be able to buy in kosher either. But it was just, and he was shocked. He couldn't believe it. Now, there are different layers. There are people who are again pious, that they want to make sure that the meat they buy is on the highest standard, and that the chicken they buy is the highest standard of kosher, because there are different levels of kosher. There are different layers, many different layers, and I don't want to get into it now. But there are things that if you can, you should be stringent about this, and if you can, you should be stringent about this. Right now, does that say that if you're not stringent, it's not kosher? No. But someone who's pious will take that extra precautionary measure to add to it. Now, what we're trying to do is to get to a base level. Let's get to a base level of observing the things that we want to observe, the things that we want to connect with, the things that the Torah commands us to connect with, to observe. Then, if we can add to it at whatever level we can. So the first thing would be, if someone doesn't light, for example, Shabbos candles, they shouldn't be rushing to buy a brand new candelabra that will be all gorgeous. No. First, start lighting the candles. Make it part of your routine, right? A person should first try to buy whatever kosher they can. Stop buying the stuff which is totally treif, right? And like we mentioned at the beginning, before we went live, we were having this lively conversation about different foods that you can buy, alternates that are kosher, right? You can buy the mock crab, and you can buy the fakin, or they call that the beef fry that's kosher, right? There are all these things that you can have that you can find that's kosher. You can find a kosher brand that sells it, and from those who know, say that it tastes almost the same as the treif stuff. And the Talmud tells us God didn't want us to suffer by giving us commandments of foods we can't eat. On the contrary, He gave us an alternative of the taste and texture in a different animal that is kosher, right? But if a person is committed, okay, so now let's take the first level and then work all the way up. The top level is being pristine in every area, is being, again, pious at the highest level possible. Okay, so he says, "V'lo l'mayit b'hem klal," and not to skimp on them at all, not to go cheap on anything, to do it the right way, right, in total perfection. That's what we're seeking. What's the second part? Chassidus, indeed, between man and his fellow. What is that? The second subdivision of the first main element of piety concerns interaction between man and his fellow. And its essence is immense benevolence. Meaning that a person should always find ways to bestow good upon Hashem's creatures and not harm them. A person should always find positive things to say about people, not negative things. A person should try to help people with kind words and not with sharp words. A person should try to go out of his way to do acts of kindness, not acts of aggression and acts of cruelty, God forbid, right? Etc., etc. And these includes these three areas of kindness, of physical matters, financial matters, and in emotional matters. So what does it mean, physical matters? Ramchal expands on these three areas, beginning with benevolence. He says, Baguf, concerning matters, physical matters, sheyeh mishtadel lazor kol odem b'ma sheyuchal. He says, a piety, right? Piety entails that one should strive to help every person however he can. V'yakel masam ma'aleim, and lighten their load from upon them. V'hu mashashaniru, and this is the concept we learned about as one of the 48 ways of acquiring the Torah, which we do in our amazing Wednesdays with Wolbe's, on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. with Sahava and myself, right? We learned these four, and that is V'nose be'ol im chaver. We're going to get this in about 3 or 4 months. We're going to get to this one, which is, I think, in way number 34 or so, and that is bearing the burden with one's fellow. You know what bearing the burden with one's fellow means? Feeling someone else's pain, feeling someone else's happiness. And it's an amazing thing. I was just realizing that in our community here, right? So it actually, in the world we're living in today, in the modern world we're living in today, so say, how many times did we want to be at a wedding like Scott's, and we couldn't be there. So what do? Right? So Scott is in Jerusalem, right? We're getting married to Nava, and I'm sitting here in my house, and Bobby, you're sitting in your house, and we're dressed in our Shabbos clothes, and we're as if we're at that wedding. That is called feeling the joy with another person from afar. Imagine my great-grandfather, one time in the middle of he was with his whole family, right? And at a certain time, he looks at his watch, he stands up, he gets dressed in his Shabbos clothes, and he starts dancing in the middle of the dining room. He starts dancing, and everyone's like, what in the world is going on here? He says, right now, my student is getting married in that town, far away from here, right? So I'm dancing with him right now. That's feeling someone else's joy. Feeling someone else's pain is the same thing. You know what? There's nothing that we can do for the people of Haiti after they had their terrible tragedy. But you know what we could do? We can sit in our homes and cry for them. Feel their pain. Feel the experience that they're going through. That we could do. and that we should do. Okay, and that's what Ramchal is teaching us here. He says, if harm threatens the body of his fellow, and you're able to prevent it from striking or to remove it after it has struck, and you can avert further harm, yitrach kedela, so he should exert himself in order to do so. One should exert himself in order to avoid and eliminate the person from this pain, this damage that's going to be reaching them. So there's a pain of carrying someone else's burden. If you know that, so I'll give you an example. Okay, if you're walking into a restaurant, and you see that your friend's car, the friend that you're meeting for dinner or lunch, is already there, right? Their car is there, but you see that the light is on in their car. And you go and you see that one of the doors is open a little bit. So you just bump the door in a little bit, right? So that you can close the door and the light, it saves their battery, right? That's a great mitzvah. Why? Because imagine what's going to happen when they come back after the meeting. They're not going to be able to start their car. They're going to have to call the tow truck. They're going to be late to their next meeting. Their whole day is going to be, here you saved their whole day. You saved their, right? Small little act can change. And that's what Ramchal is telling us. To act an act of benevolence in physical matters. If we can go out of our way and do a physical action to assist someone else. So benevolence in financial matters, how is that? So concerning financial matters, piety obligates one to assist his fellow financially as much as he can afford. So if you can afford to assist someone financially, get them to a point where they can get a job, get them to a point where they can feed their family, etc., etc. And to prevent financial damages from besetting his fellow in any way that he can, even if he is not responsible for those damages. And it certainly demands that he himself distance all kinds of damages that could occur because of him. Whether damages to a private person or to the public, this means that he must refrain from any action and remove any object that may cause damage to others. And even though right now the potential for damage emerging from those objects is unlikely, since such damage is at least possible, yasirim v'yavirim, he should remove them or eliminate them. The Amru Zechon Levracha and our sages of blessed memory said the following maxim that encapsulates this mindset in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers, chapter 2, Mishnah 12. Let your fellow's possessions be as dear to you as your own. So if you see that someone's just talking, we gave an example about a door being open. What's if you see about your friend's window being open, and now someone can steal, or the rain could rain into someone's car, and now it's going to damage their possessions, right? How would you treat it if it was yours? Oh, I would find a way to close it. I would find a way to let them know that it's open. Let them know that it's starting to rain. Let them know. Care about someone else's possessions as if it were yours. And the last part of this first part is benevolence regarding another's emotional well-being. It says benefesh, concerning emotional matters. Piety demands that one strive to provide for his fellow whatever gratification he can. Bein b'inyonei hakavod, bein b'chol shara ha'inyonim. Whether in matters of honor or any other matters that affect his fellow's emotional well-being. Imagine the following: someone insults your friend in public, right? This has all happened to us. Your friend, you're standing there, a whole group of friends, and someone calls out your friend and calls them a name. And what do most people do? I'm not getting involved. Well, you know what a pious person does? He cares about his friend's emotional well-being as much as he cares about his own. What if someone insulted you and hurt you? Would you just stand there? No, you'd defend yourself. Why don't you defend your friend? If you cared about them to the point where you felt like it was you would stand up for them, right? So our sages tell us as follows. Ramchal says as follows: Kol mashu yodeh shim yaseu lechavero hu mekabel nachas ruach mimenu. Anything about which he knows that if he would do it for his fellow, that fellow would receive from it a sense of satisfaction. Mitzvahs Chassidus hu la'asoso. It is included in the imperative of piety to do so. Kol shekain shelo yitzarenu b'shum minei tzar klal yeh be'eze open sheyeh. Certainly, piety demands, right? Chassidus demands that he not cause his fellow any form of anguish whatsoever through any possible means. So, if we're that careful that someone else shouldn't hurt, we're so careful that someone else's well-being, right? We're careful about our own well-being. We care about our own emotional health. We care about our own state of, of well-being. Certainly, we should also be careful about our friends' well-being. Okay, my dear friends, we're going to stop here for tonight. This is a little welcome back to our class. Hopefully, next week we won't have any technical glitches like we did in the beginning today. But I want to thank you all for being here. It's a true honor to get back to this class now with the new year, a fresh new chapter, and hopefully we will continue to learn and to grow and to connect and to elevate our relationship with Hashem every single week. So to our friends on Facebook, thank you so much for joining us. Please like and share this video. You can also listen, by the way, many of our classes are on podcast now, the Jewish Inspiration Podcast. You can find it online on Spotify, on Apple, on Google, on Amazon, on all of the different platforms. So we're really, really excited about that, that they're going up there. I believe now I have 25 episodes up, and every week I'm loading up 2 new episodes. So you can follow us and listen to other classes there as well. So without any further ado, to our friends on Facebook, Shalom from Texas, thank you so much.